I'm Randy Robinson. Welcome to Life Today, a special time here, actually. Jack Deere is the author of a new book called Even in Our Darkness. But Jack Deere is a long-time friend of the family and of the ministry. And just if you're not familiar with him and his ministry, you should be. So great to have you.
Thanks, Randy. It's great to be here.
So for anybody that may be familiar with the ministry and heard you speak, was it late 80s, early 90s, with us? Catch us up. What have you been doing the last 20 years?
I was a professor of Old Testament exegesis and Semitic languages, and I left Dallas Seminary, where I taught, in 87. That was my last year to teach there. And then I spent time with John Wimber.
In the Vineyard?
Yeah, I was in the room when Wimber prayed for people with blind eyes, and they saw. I mean, I saw x-rays of curved necks that were straightened now. And
what did that do to your theology?
Well, but by then,
were you?
No, by then my theology already changed,
okay.
And that's what got me in trouble.
Oh,
I didn't change because I saw a miracle. I had a conversation with a really smart guy who believed in healing. He was a professor of psychiatry, and I didn't believe in healing. I thought everybody who believes in healing has lost their mind.
Or fake.
Yeah, they're just stomping on the stage and that yelling and shouting. And this guy was brilliant. We used all of his books. His name was John White. And I'm on a phone conversation with him, inviting him to come to my church in Fort Worth, Christ Chapel. And he tells me that he believes in healing. And then he tells me authentic healing stories. And that conversation got me to go back and look up every single New Testament healing story. And I'm a Greek Hebrew guy. That's my forte is exegesis. And after reading every story and asking God, why did you do it? In each story, I came to the conclusion that God was still healing today. Because in the New Testament, he healed out of compassion. He healed to open doors to evangelism. He healed to show that his son was the Son of God. He healed to open wide doors to evangelism. There are like 10 or 12 reasons, and none of them are rooted in a historical transition. They're all rooted in the eternal character of God. So that's how I started believing in healing. And then I started praying for healing, and then I met Wimber, and then Wimber just took me to a whole new level. I mean, he was amazing.
Yeah. So this book is a tough one.
Yeah. You know, what I say is, at 17, I didn't know a single verse of Scripture. At 27, I became a professor of Old Testament exegesis and Semitic languages at Dallas Seminary. And from 17 to 22, virtually everything I touched turned to gold. I mean, how many 27-year-olds become professors?
Yeah.
And then 12 years later, I lost my job at the seminary because of my friendship with Wimber. I've become the right-hand man of one of the greatest healers in the country. I mean, maybe in the world at the time. He's certainly one of the greatest teachers of healing, and I travel all around the world with him. And then I leave him, go to Montana, paradise for a hunter. I'm a bow hunter, rifle hunter, the whole deal. Write books that get translated into 12, 15 languages. They circulate all over the world. And in December 27th, 2000, I'm sitting on a mountain of paradise. I'm also heavily invested in the tech stocks, and I got a ton of money still in that environment. So I feel rich, I feel smart, super successful. And on the morning of December 27th, I found my second-born son in his bedroom. He had shot himself with a 44 Magnum that we used to scare bears away. He had mixed a lethal cocktail the night before, drunk it, and we gathered around his body, his mom, his older brother, younger sister, and the four of us said, we're going to pray until the Lord gives him back to us, or until the police come and make us leave. And in 30 minutes, the police came and asked us to leave. And that we were just plunged into a time of darkness and confusion. And Lisa, I thought I was going to lose her to insanity. Her grief was so overwhelming.
Yeah, I can't imagine. How did? So you're seeing healings for years and years and years and years, and yet you got to be thinking, God, why couldn't you have just healed them of this addiction?
Totally, and that happened for some of my friends. Their kids that were addicted, they got healed. I never prayed for anyone as much as I prayed for my son.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so certain that God was going to answer those prayers and that he was actually going to be with me in ministry. And he would be traveling around the world, or we'd be building church together until the morning I found him. Those dreams came crashing down. And then it's like, I wake up the next morning and I start to pray, and I think, why pray?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the prayers of my heart didn't get answered, and I had all these promises about prayer, and they weren't working for me now, and I'm questioning my theology and all that. So it's a really confusing time. But here's the key for me. During that whole time of darkness, God found a way to break through the darkness with like an utterly convincing demonstration of his love. Not like explaining a scriptural text, but an utterly in-person, I delight in you, I love you. And here's one of the first ones that happened to me. It's 2 weeks after his funeral. And one of the people ask me all the time, they say, what do you do? How do you protect yourself when you go through something like this? And I said, the most helpful thing for us was not some paradigm about grief and how it works and all that. It was having friends who loved us and who gathered around us. They didn't try to get God off the hook for what he let happen. They just loved us. They cried with us, and they washed our clothes. They fed us when we couldn't do the basic things for ourselves. Our longest-term friends, John and Nancy Snyder in Fort Worth, Nancy called the morning we lost Scott, and she said, Jackie, you get home right now. We're taking care of you. And when we walked into Nancy's house, this huge, huge home on the cover of Architectural Digest, Nancy said, welcome to your new home. You take this side, we'll take that side, and we're going to grow old together. So we had these super loving friends that surrounded us. And then God would break through the darkness. So 2 weeks later, we're still living with John and Nancy. And the bill for Scott's funeral comes. It was $10,064.69. And the funeral home couldn't find me because they didn't have an address for me. So it took them a while. And they said, we want payment immediately. Then 30 minutes after that funeral bill arrived, my secretary comes in, and she's got this huge sack. I don't know what that is. It's sympathy cards.
Sure.
So I dump all the sympathy cards out on my desk, and out of 38 sympathy cards, 22 checks fall. One check for each year of Scott's life. I totaled them up, and they total $10,065.
Wow.
Just a few cents more than his buried. I sat there, and my heart started beating. I started trembling. I didn't say thank you. I said, why? Yeah. Why? I've got all the money in the world in the bank right now. I can pay for his funeral. Why? What are you saying? I mean, I'd written a book on his voice. I know he's saying something. Yeah. So I just said, what are you saying? And while I was sitting at the desk, 3 sentences just pounded. It's like they exploded in my brain. I paid for his death. I paid for his life. And I'll pay for everything you need the rest of your life. My heart just exploded, and I wept. And it was like he sat down beside me at the desk and said, I am going to be here with you, and I will see you through this. He didn't take away the pain, but that overwhelming sense of his affection and promise gave me hope, and it gave me power to endure. Eventually, he did take away the pain.
Yeah,
but that was years and years later.
Sure. I'm guessing that even today, still sometimes you feel it.
Not really. I mean, those first anniversaries really dark. All the first holidays really dark. But it was maybe the 11th or 12th anniversary. 12th anniversary. It was the 12th. And I realized that all of the sting of Scott was gone, and just the sweetness was there.
Oh wow!
And seeing how God has used his death in so many other ways, ways I could never have imagined. And people said to me at the beginning, Randy, they said, you'll never get over this. And every time somebody said that, I flinched. I just didn't want to believe that one reckless act of my son would emotionally maim me forever. I wanted to believe that God's healing power was greater than that, assuming that God and I were going to be talking in the future.
Right. Sometimes I think people mean that you'll be changed forever by it.
Yeah, yeah. Or they're trying
to never forget it.
Yeah, totally.
But not that you won't ever heal.
Yeah, nobody says it maliciously, but I think another thing people are trying to say is, I can't imagine going through this kind of pain. This just seemed overwhelming. And the truth is, until you actually go through it, you have no idea of how you'll get through it, because there's no grace when you just think about the loss of a loved one. There's no grace there for that. But when you actually go through that, man, he will give you the grace. That's my story.
I hear that a lot from people that go through things that I can't imagine going through.
Yeah.
Do you think God, because that kind of wound is so emotional? I mean, that isn't an intellectual wound as much as
Right.
it is just a raw emotional wound. Do you think that God, obviously he recognizes that, but do you think that he comes and meets you on that emotional level?
He certainly met me on that level. I mean, just like that. I mean, he could say, he could have led me to some scripture about God loving. He could have done that, or he could have even said,
You knew them all.
Yeah.
And you know them in Greek and Hebrew.
Right. So, or he could have said, I really love you, Jack. But what he did is he was so incredibly creative in the way, I actually left him for a while for money. I mean, I got so involved with the stock market, I almost had enough money I'd never have to work again the rest of my life. And I wasn't going to church. I was writing books and traveling and all that. And it's like when he gave me that money, he says, okay, if money's important to you, I'll speak to your heart through money. Whatever it takes to get to you, past your mind and get to your heart, I'll use. I knew exactly what he was doing. I was reading, for a period of several years, I was reading stock market stuff and books on economics and all that, way more than I was reading the Bible or Christian stuff. I mean, I knew all that stuff. What was really exciting me was the market, not God. And so in giving me that money and then saying those sentences to me, it's like he sat down beside me, put his arm around me, he said, it's okay. It's okay. Like I didn't have to say, please forgive me for not hanging out with you for the last few years. It was just, it was amazing.
He was just glad to be back with you.
Oh yeah, just amazing. Just what I felt in my heart. And then it was just those kind of things repeated. I'll just tell you one more story. This was 8 weeks after I lost my son. I speak every month at Trinity Church in Amarillo. Been doing it for years. They called 8 weeks after I lose my son. All the pastors are gone. There's going to be a guest speaker, and they don't have anybody to introduce him. They say, could you just fly in for 24 hours? And Lisa says, go. My son and my daughter were there with Lisa, and so I went. After the service, they do 4 services, 2 on Saturday, 2 Sunday mornings, so Saturday afternoon. So it's 6:30 Saturday afternoon. I'm standing down at the front where all the people are praying for people, but I'm not praying for anybody. This is my first Sunday back in church. I did not go to church for 8 weeks after I lost my son. If I go to church to speak after I lost my son, I had nothing to say. So, but now I'm there just to introduce the speaker. So the service is over. I'm standing out the front, and I see this blonde lady, a pretty blonde lady, leading a person. And I can't tell if the person's a man or a woman, a boy or a girl. The person has no face. And I'm watching her leading, and then she starts heading straight toward me. And where there should have been eyes, there were just these slits sewn shut. Where there should have been a nose, there was just this mangled kind of flesh shoved in against a concave surface. And where there should have been a mouth, there was this misshapen hole. And then there was a permanent trach tube coming out of the throat.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, she's walking straight toward me. She walks up to me, and she says, hi, my name's Michelle. And she said, this is my son, Aaron. Aaron doesn't yet believe in God, but he came up here this morning because I asked him to. 6 months ago, he was really distraught. He put a shotgun under his chin and pulled the trigger. It blew away his face, but not his life. And he's had multiple surgeries to get him to this point. Would you pray for him?
Oh, wow. What were you thinking?
I wasn't thinking. All of a sudden, I looked at him and I said, Aaron, my name is Jack. Would you like me to pray for you? He puts his finger over the trach tube so the air goes up his vocal cords. And he says, yes. I put my right hand on his back, and the second my left hand touches his heart, I feel the power of God come down on me, rippling down my neck and my back. And I'm on automatic pilot. I know exactly what to say. I say, Aaron, my son pulled the trigger at Christmas, but he didn't make it. God spared you because he has purposes left for your life if you want them. And then Michelle began to sob, and she just said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were the pastor whose son. I'm just so sorry. I never would have come here. And I stopped praying for him. I turned to her and I said, Michelle, do not cry. This is a divine appointment. You are following God. He's destined us to be together for these moments. And then I went back, finished praying for him. And then I prayed for Michelle, had exactly the same experience. And then I watched them walk away. And I looked up to heaven, and I knew that this was all a setup from God. And I said, God, there's nobody like you. Nobody writes stories like this. And I knew what he was doing. I knew he was saying, stay with me. And those parts I broke in you, I'm going to heal you, and I'm going to give you power to help the hopeless. He could have said, I love you in any number of ways, but doing it like that gave me hope by the Holy Spirit for the future and let me feel in a moment of weakness how special I am to him.
You got a whole book of that right here. So go get it. What's the website, Jack, for the book?
It's the title of the book, eveninourdarkness.com.
Very good.